Hello and welcome to This Day. I'm BJ Arnett, your host. I am really excited about this next interview. This is Amanda Hope Haley, and Amanda has an amazing story. Along with being a fantastic professional in archaeology, she has quite a testimony to tell and has written an amazing book several years ago that really gives you an understanding of the heart that it takes to walk through certain journeys. Amanda, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for allowing us to delve into your life and speak of this book, Bearing Among the Fruitful, Navigating Infertility with Hope, Wisdom, and Patience. This is, I love how it's described here. It says it's an entertaining, insightful, and well-researched survey of infertility. You know, when I think of the story of infertility, which I went through myself, I don't think of it as entertaining. Okay, I will tell you the truth. It was a rough moment. It's a tough journey. So tell us about your journey and how did you guys navigate?
Well, when I graduated, I got a master's degree in biblical archaeology from Harvard, and my husband and I could not afford to spend any more time living in Boston. We flew back to Middle Tennessee, and I started working on a Bible translation with Thomas Nelson, and we decided to start having a family. While I was doing that, I was diagnosed with various forms of infertility, and my husband will tell you he was not perfect either. And so we entered into doing the things that you do, IUI and all of that. And through that time, I had multiple miscarriages. And I realized that, you know, it's the kind of thing you need to keep a sense of humor about. And I was looking at that time. You can go down
a very dark path.
You can.
You really can.
And at that time, a lot of people were coming to me and saying the kindest things that, you know, God will give you the desires of your heart. And Sarah had been through menopause before she had children, and pray Hannah's prayer. And they were giving me all of these kind words from the Bible that were really taken out of context. And as I was going through the journey, I realized that those words, though kindly meant, actually made it that much harder for me.
And those words were not for you.
They weren't. And I was left feeling not just broken in my body, because another thing people would say was, God literally made you for this. I felt broken that way, but then I also felt broken in my faith, because all of these women in the Bible, all except one, who I found, and that's Anna, all of these women in the Bible who struggled with infertility had a child in the end. She was rewarded for her faithfulness with the child, and that wasn't happening for us. And so that made my journey so very dark. And I found that there weren't a lot of resources out there for me. Well, so Thomas Nelson, the publisher I was working with at the time on the Bible translation, I was working with so many great people. They asked me to write this book.
Wow.
And I leaned back and I was just, you know, if I'm going to do this, what is the book that I'm missing that's out there? And so in a way, I call it a sort of a primer on the subject. I start off and, you know, just sort of describing the nuts and bolts of, you know, what's some of the medical, what's some of the scientific part here. So it's a good book, not just for women going through it, but for the women in their lives and even the men in their lives, for them to learn a lot about it, maybe learn some things to say and not to say. But then each chapter has a different focus. One is on the relationship with my husband, what our marriage went through, and having to realize that even just the two of us, we still constituted a family.
Yes.
We didn't have to have a child in order to be a family. And but then I very much wanted women to not feel alone, because this can feel like a very lonely journey. I feel like people now are talking about it a little bit more than they were, say, 10 years ago. But I included the stories of other women who I knew who had their own versions of infertility that they had gone through. And some of their stories are humorous too. And so I included those so that I hope a woman can pick it up and identify with someone in there, can learn from it, can be encouraged. And I hope that my words support them and encourage them to look toward God. Because my husband and I went through 2 complete rounds with 2 different hospitals in Nashville.
Wow.
And the first experience was a very negative one, one in which we felt like we were on a conveyor belt. And those were the stories that I tried to spin and make humorous.
Goodness.
And then the second time around, finding a doctor who shared my faith, and who treated my health the way that I would. He was a man who did all the testing first and encouraged me to try non-invasive things before we went further. And at the end of working with him, I could honestly say, I feel like we've tried everything we could try, everything we could afford to try. There's a chapter on finances in it too, because it is very, insurance doesn't cover it. But I really felt like we had done everything that we could do, and being able to step back and not have regrets about what we tried and where we ended up, but then also being able to look to the future. It can be a time of spiritual growth if you enter into it in prayer. And my husband was key to me changing one big perspective. And he pointed out to me when I was pushing us toward adoption, he pointed out to me that I was looking at adoption as really a means to an end. I desperately wanted a child. And he's like, you're not pausing and you're not waiting for God, and you're not being prayerful in that way about this. I was praying for my health. I was praying we would have a healthy child. I wasn't praying for what God's direction would be in all of this for us. And he hit the pause button, and I was really mad at him at the time. I was like, why are you making me wait? Why can't we, look at fostering and all this? And he knew me better than I knew myself in that moment. And, I realize now, looking back, that God did have other plans for me. And going through all of that, it's hard. There will always be part of me who tears up, and as I am a little bit right now, when I think about having children, that's something I will miss. But I have been blessed in so many other ways, and I'm thankful that I followed God. And God gave me the desires of my heart, not by giving me a child, but by changing my heart and making me see
what wisdom it took to see that.
It took a lot of heartache, and I know now that I'm walking in His will every day, and with archaeology and writing and the things that I do, I'm teaching adults, but also children. I have the opportunity to go into schools and teach kids about archaeology and get them excited about the Word of God when they're really young and they still think dinosaurs are cool, and they get really excited by just my hat and my trowel. It's easy to, I'm enjoying so much being involved in so many children's lives. And so mine is a story of not just infertility and figuring out how to have a child of my own at the end, but really it was a journey of my heart changing and developing a deeper love, a deeper relationship with God, and realizing that, His plans are the only plans that I want.
Amanda, there's so much in what you have said. First of all, it takes great introspection to recognize that you don't have all the answers. And
sometimes it takes a strong husband to point that out, even when you don't want to hear it.
Oh my goodness, do I get it? And you don't want to hear it because what you want, you don't see anything wrong with what you want.
Right.
But what you want may not be what God has said. We see that a lot in another type of situation as well. When people have family that are in the hospital and they say, pray for them to come out of the coma, pray for them. Well, if that is not exactly what God is saying for that person right now, are we opposing what God is doing? Are they saying to themselves, as you see a coma and they are saying, I'm about to go home to be with my Lord. And inside of their very being, there's a leaping that we could never understand. That takes a bigger insight and a stronger heart.
It does.
And what your husband was encouraging you to do was have a stronger heart.
I think so. The book is about infertility, but as I look back on it now, I see that as being, for me, the moment in my life where I really learned about grief. That I've watched through grief in other ways too, but that was such a prolonged period, and there was so much pain and so much grief, and it's so much grief in what we experienced, that as you're saying, as you know, I'm a little bit older now, and we're walking through other times of seeing loved ones being sick. And
Yes.
you know, sadly, we attended a funeral of a family member recently that we were in that situation where you do want to pray for healing, but also just having almost a peace and an understanding that God's doing something else here.
That's the deal.
It is.
It's the peace and understanding that God has got this.
Yeah.
And before we ever came to the bedside of this person, he already had the plan.
He did.
He already had the plan. But who are we taking care of best? Are we taking care of the individual that's in that bed?
Yeah.
Or are we taking care of our own heart and saying, I don't want you to go yet. I need you to stay here. I need you to stay here. But for the one who is saved, what better point?
Yeah.
What better place
Right.
to be at the side of the Father? It just,
That's
you know,
true.
it's such a hard thing to wrap yourself around.
It is. It absolutely
It
is.
really is. And I get the understanding of there is a grief that comes when you are dealing with infertility and in this other subject when a family member is passing away. But I think grief, it has no boundary.
That's true.
In that regard. It is painful, period. But you began to, I love you how your husband did that. You began to shift.
Yes.
And that shifting made you available to minister to someone other than yourself.
I hope so.
Well, now you've got these little people who are like, archaeology, yeah.
Yes.
I think I like that. That you can't excite a child about the Word of God if you're not excited about the Word of God. You can't tell a story about archaeology and lead them back into the Word of God without being excited about it.
Yes.
But now, you don't have one child, girl, you got a whole bunch of them around here.
I think that's true. When we were in the thick of this, the church that we attended at the time, the elders came to me and they asked me to become their children's minister. And we really prayed about it and thought about it. And as it turned out, we ended up moving to Denver. We did, like, if there was an opposite thing to do, that's what happened. My husband was invited to be a deacon, and God had very different plans for us at that time. But I remember even in that moment feeling like these men, I think they had an inkling of what we were going through. That wasn't why they asked me to do it.
Wow.
They asked me to do it because of, I guess, who I was and what I could teach those children. And that meant the world to me at that time, that they were offering me these children. And that really was probably the kernel that I didn't even see for years after of where I am now and being able to go into schools and speak to children. I get to have so many others. And if I'd had my own child, I would be so very invested in that little person's development and growth that I don't know how much I would be considering the next generation as a whole.
Wow, what a word.
And so I'm thankful that God did educate me in the way that he did and give me the particular backgrounds that he did. I'm even most days thankful for what we went through with infertility because it gave me a different love for children, and it also gave me a unique love for women who are going through the same thing right now. And infertility is only on the rise, and I'm that person who is not going to look at you and tell you how old Sarah was when she had a baby, because a child is not God's reward for faithfulness.
You are a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of understanding, and a wealth of heart. Thank you so much for being here, Amanda Hope Haley. If you haven't heard about the book, it is Barren Among the Fruitful and Navigating Infertility with Hope, Wisdom, and Patience. We hope you get it all. God bless you. Bye-bye.